Good morning. It's Monday morning, which means it's time for another morning map build. Hello. Yes, I'm Tailz from Studio Wildfire. Hello, good morning. I hope your week is starting off very good. It's been pouring rain here during the night, so we're all a little bit soggy. Now, where are we? So we're looking at a map that I made last week. I have been a naughty boy. I haven't actually uploaded this to the asset browser in my website yet. So sorry about that. Let me find something I can actually draw. Where is it? Where is it? Well, actually, I'm going to do something interesting today. Hang on, let me just grab. So I'll use this. Oop. Open. Yes, open in Clip Studio. There we go. Okay. A couple of things I want to do today. I want to rough out continue a little bit on this, but also rough out some ideas for this other dungeon called the Needle, which I want to do. So there'll be a little bit of lore discussion, but I'm going to start off by showing off something that some people will hopefully be very, very excited about. I've released the Orc Horde Token Pack for Foundry, and I'm currently working on the Goblin Tribes Token Pack. It's taking a little while, simply because I'm doing something different, so I'm going to show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to save my settings, go yes, update, let it do its thing. Poor old potato PC doesn't like streaming and running art program and running this. But anyway, here we are. So I've made, so to make it just a little bit more interesting than just a bunch of, tokens. Let's go here. I have made the token pack into a bunch of characters. And they use a special feature in Foundry, which is the wildcard for token artwork. So if I just grab the Orc Peasant, drag him out. Oop, Foundry doesn't seem to like using the pen. Okay, just have to use the mouse. There we go. Bonk. There is our Orc Peasant. Now the cool thing is, because it's using the wildcard, you can just grab him, drag out another one, and it'll use a different artwork from the Orc Peasant. Now you'll notice that a number of these guys are labeled, like, mace and shield, spear and shield, wounded, axe and shield. That's so that it separates out. So these are all the Orc Peasants, but each of them is armed with a different weapon. So for example, this is the shield and axe. So if you drag out another shield and axe guy, he'll be in a different pose, different sort of action pose. Same thing with the mace and shield. Drag him out, he's in a different action pose. Oops, well, he just came down with the same pose. Yeah, but as you see, as they come down with the different poses, so I'll get rid of that one. Let's get a different one in there. Bonk. And then we've got the spear and shield. So it's Orc with a spear and shield. And then we've got the wounded Orc. So he's been knocked down, or hang on. I think there's one with blood and one without blood. So it doesn't have much to to jump between. Oops, hang on. Where's this wounded? Oh, some of them have, like, no weapon. So yeah, something very. I hope that people will enjoy. That's how I'm doing That's how I'm thinking of doing token packs like this going forwards, especially for Foundry, because I find I'm using Foundry a lot more these days. I do like the other two, and I'll still keep producing material for Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, but gotta admit, I like the features in Foundry. Foundry is pretty nice. The others have things that they do better, but I'm finding I'm enjoying Foundry a little bit more. But yeah, that's the Orc Horde. So you can get the Orc Horde in the Foundry store, or you can just go to my website, and it'll have links there for you. I'll even put a link in the description of this stream. I don't think there's a link there right now, but you know, you can. There's if I just delete delete these guys. So if I go, you know, the Groen tribe, and there's our Orc Warlord. Put him down. See, he's got no, because it's just a straight Orc Warlord. He's got no weapons. So if you go the Orc Warlord with Battle Axe and Shield, and here he is with Battle Axe and Shield in a different bunch of poses. And yeah, there's those guys. So at the moment I'm working on the goblins. The goblins will be next. I just need to do all the little character sheets for them. There's also one other thing. So you get the compendium, which has all the little characters in it. But you also get like a little Orc Horde items, because I made just a bunch of items, so that you don't have to worry about having certain modules or whatever loaded. You know, it's just going to load from these objects, and they're just simple objects. There's not really a lot of description. It's just basically so that you've got an item there that, you know, you don't have to worry about having extra modules loaded or any shenanigans like that. So yeah, that's the Orc Horde. I hope you all like it. But let's close that down and get into this. So last Monday, I was doing a bit of drawing and working out the sewers for the village of Carlsberg. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Oops, not that much. Didn't mean to do that. Here we go. Okay, so what I was thinking of is the village of Carlsberg. It's a village, for those of you who don't know, it's a village that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It is way out between the Principality of East and the Great Gnome Kingdom of North. It's sort of between those, in an area where there's really nothing else. There's like there's the usual random dungeons in the area from the previous civilization, but there's no other major current settlements. The big settlements of the big gnome cities are, you know, days travel between each other. So these entrepreneurs that created Carlsberg sort of made this giant tavern in the middle of nowhere, and it's sort of like those places where, you know, where you're driving along like a really long road between cities, and you'll see a sign that says, you know, last petrol for 100 miles or something rather crazy like that, because there's a service station coming up, or it'll be like, you know, last food for 100 miles, because there's a little eatery or something coming up. It's one of those places, so there'd be like a big sign out saying last food and water for so many days journey, and they put it there specifically because you've kind of got no choice but to go there and get food and water, because it's going to be the last place you can get food and water for several days journey. But getting back to the sewers, so they built this place in the middle of nowhere, and because it's in the world of the cube, it's on stone, so there isn't really any place for waste material to go. So the stonemasons of the village have built an underground sewer works to take care of all the sewerage for the village. and they've captured some slimes to take care of it. They've got one big slime which they sort of chop out bits and then use these as little slimes in like little processing plants. And that's what... So if we have a look here, we've got the slime pit. And that's where they keep the big one. They've got a big one that they keep in there. And then when they need bits, when they need to sort of do some processing, they sort of scoop off a bit of the slime and then they put it over here. So in these rooms, this is all underground. And these chambers, or these passageways, are just access tunnels for the pipes that come down from each of the households. Sort of like, you know, what we've got. So they have these you know, terracotta pipes which come down and basically just channel the waste to a central pit in each of these circular rooms, where they have a stone, effectively just a big stone bin, because the slime will eat everything organic and it will corrode metals. Like it won't corrode, you know, silver or anything. I mean, silver or gold won't corrode those precious metals, but like your non-precious metals, like your steel, your iron, probably copper, other things like that. Those things it'll corrode, but it won't corrode or eat stone, or stone-like fabric. So they keep it in big. If I get rid of this X, don't need that there. I was just sort of working out that I actually need to have that there. So they keep it in these big sort of stone. You could call it like a bucket, really, because I sort of envisage that they've got like a stone container, and it's, you know, it's got a thick wall. You know, there's a bucket. Whoop. And then they keep the slime in there, and then they have pipes that come along and just put the material it is poop into the stone bucket, and the slime eats it. But the slimes, you know, they don't really like having a 24/7 diet of poop. They do kind of give out, which is why they keep coming in. So they've got the big master slime. They keep coming and sort of chopping a bit off. So they chop a bit off, put it in there, and then, you know, it digests the waste, and that's their waste management system. Because one of the adventures I'm going to have is the slime will escape. They'll have an accident and it'll get out. Because part of the problem that they have is that they have, where is it? Where's one of the buildings? Okay, here's Goat Square. This is a big square called Goat Square. This is where all of the goat herders sort of bring their goats in here, and the butcher, he's actually located here. So the butcher has his own pipes coming down into here, into this one where they take care of all of the offal left over from the goats. But yeah, that's where the butcher's is. So the Goat Square is here, but there's going to be a tank underground for this building here, and it's basically fresh water. And they're also going to have a large tank system underground, which I forgot to add in last time I was drawing this map. So I'm going to have to make a note. Water. And here, water. So this is where the freshwater system comes in, because this one here. I'll probably make another one somewhere, like maybe this one here will be a water tower as well. It's basically where they raise the water up into a big tank to create water pressure. It's like, if ever you've seen like, you know, big high-rise buildings. So they've got several floors. And then they'll have a huge tank on the top of the building. Apparently you'd see this on American buildings from 1930s, 20s and stuff like that, where they have like a huge tank. Usually they're all wooden things. But the whole idea was that they pumped water up into here. So this would be full of water. And then you had pipes coming down. And because this is above all of your building, it created the water pressure so that water would come out your taps. Same deal with these towers. So there are going to be some towers around town that create water pressure for the local buildings. And there's going to be another one for this building here, because this is the Carlsberg bathhouse, which is part of the Carlsberg Tavern, which is this big building. Yep. So the whole idea is they have tanks up high, which, because they're higher than all your taps and stuff and the like, they create water pressure so that when you turn your tap on, water comes out. It's that simple. And then, well, the actual sewage system is quite simply just gravity fed. Gravity will, you know, as long as your pipes are going downhill, the material, the waste, will get washed downhill by water. So so Carlsberg is pretty advanced to have this sort of system, but they need to have all these facilities to run it. But it is basically a giant. The entire village basically is set up just to run the tavern. And the tavern, it's a place where you can come along, sleep. You can get food. You can get your supplies, and there's a bathhouse. The whole works. So this entire village is basically just set up to run the tavern. And that's the village of Carlsberg, which hopefully I'll put some information out soon, because I do have. It's one of those villages where you'll get a lot of side quests, and you'll pass through it a lot on the actual quest. So I'm actually doing up a. I'm actually doing up a. What would I call it? It's a little. Like a city overview, like a settlement overview. So each of the main buildings, which is an actual shop. So for example, this shop here. This is, who is that? That's the leather. I think this is the leather workshop, Gil's leather workshop. He makes all leather things, so you can go there, you can get leather armor, leather, bridles and whatnot for your horses. This building here is these stonemasons. Not a lot you'll actually get from them, because they pretty much do all their work for the village. They don't really work for other people, but there could be, for example, that'll be where you'll get the quest to go and help the stonemasons with the escaped slime. This is the carpenter's workshop, just here. That's where, if you've got a wagon, or you need like a treasure chest built, or, you need carpentry things done, you go there. There is humble coin exchange. That is right there. That's where you go and change your money. Because in the world of the cube, gold coins, all your usual fantasy gold treasure coins are they're more valuable for their actual metal rather than the value of the coin. And all of the empires, all of the gnome cities actually use a proper minted coin rather than a coin that's valuable because it's made out of a valuable substance. It's like gold. Pardon me. So they use coins that are basically bronze coins, like it's like a Roman coin. So they have the base currency is the penny. That's that's pretty much the peasant currency is the penny. Peasants are pretty much going to be only using pennies to buy things because they get paid in pennies and they can spend pennies to buy things. Most expensive things are actually bought with what's called a sovereign. A sovereign. Now, a penny is probably only about 15 millimeters in size, like a tiny little coin. So you have bags and bags of pennies. But the big currency, the currency of the wealthy and the merchant class, is the sovereign, and obviously it's got the sovereign's head on it. The penny has the sovereign's head on it, but it's considered to be peasant currency. It's for small denomination purchases. Your everyday purchase is made with the penny. Your big purchases, like if you were going out and buying a brand new sword, you're going to be doing it with a sovereign. There is crystal money. The Imperial Gnomes have their own crystal coins, which are basically just, they look like slices of crystal, and they're transparent. And they basically look like an octagonal thing. They have like a lot of runes, so there'd be runes around through here in their little arcanic language, and then they'd have carved to be the face of the king or the monarch. And so they have these crystal coins, and there's a whole heap of different crystal coins, each with different monetary values. Now, the problem with these crystal coins is that for the Imperial Gnomes, it's taboo to actually spend their crystalline money with non-gnomes. This is the sacred coinage of their god Mechanos. Mechanos gave them according to their lore and their history, Mechanos taught them how to make this crystallized coinage. It's nigh on impossible to counterfeit, whereas the pennies and sovereigns, there's heaps of counterfeits. But the crystalline coins are nigh on impossible to counterfeit, and in fact, it would be blasphemy to counterfeit one of these crystalline coins, because it is from the technology is sort of granted by their god. But people do try it, but they're nigh on impossible to counterfeit because they're also enchanted. No one outside of the Imperial Gnomes, really knows why they're enchanted, but they are. And lots of traders try to get their hands on the coins, because if they can get their hands on the coins, they can. So think of it like this. So your penny. So you've got a little coin, penny. It basically slots in as a copper coin. Same value. Trade them 1 to 1 effectively. Unfortunately, you can't, because most money changers will only buy copper coins for their value of the copper. They won't actually buy it for the value of it being a copper coin. Because to them, the penny's got value. This is only valuable because it's copper and they need copper. Then you've got the sovereign, which I'm just going to go S because I can't remember how to spell sovereign. It is effectively a gold coin. But again, and you could trade them 1 to 1, but you can't trade them 1 to 1 because the money changers, like for example, Humble and Humble Coin Exchange, these guys, they won't buy it for the value. They won't give you one. They won't give you one sovereign for each gold coin. They'll buy the gold in bulk simply because it's gold, but they're buying it for its monetary value. I'm sorry, not its monetary value. Its value as metal. we go. Yeah, so they're not going to be buying it because it's a gold coin. They're looking at it going, oh yeah, we'll buy this because it's a chunk of gold. But they're not going to be sort of like going, okay, you give us your gold coin, I'll give you a sovereign. They'll be going, okay, give us 100 gold coins, we will give you, say, 50 sovereigns, because it's gold. Your gold coin is from a kingdom that doesn't exist in this world, so it's not really valuable. It's just worth a lump of gold, which we've got to smelt down, so it's even worth even less. But if you were just looking on a straight exchange rate, 1 penny is 1 copper, 1 sovereign is 1 gold. Then, this is where the crystalline currency comes in. The crystalline currency is basically, you could say, it's platinum pieces. It's platinum pieces. And then it has a range of coins up from there. But again, you're not going to get to be playing around with the crystal coins because you're not a gnome. You're not one of the Imperial Gnomes. You're an outsider. They really don't like outsiders, so they won't trade their crystal coins with you, which is kind of sad. But that's how the Imperial Gnomes are. They kind of are the annoying bad guys, the annoying bigots of the world of the cube. Not to say that there aren't some good Imperial Gnomes, but most of them, they've just been brought up to think that the world of the cube was made by Mechanos and he made it for them, and you're not a gnome, you're a trespasser here in their world, so sod off. So that's a little bit of lore there, but what I wanted to do today, and that's what I've got to do to this map of the sewers system, which I'm working for underneath the village of Carlsberg. And if you haven't seen the village of Carlsberg before, what I'll do is I'll zoom out. Where are we? Fits on screen. That's what we want. So this is the village of Carlsberg. This is the Trader's Way. Let me just pop in a layer that I can draw all over. So this is the Trader's Way. Whoops, wrong pen. Let's go back to my drawing pen. So this is the Trader's Way. It's a big road. It's a big chunky road. It's actually, so think of it like, so there's a road surface, then there's an embankment. And the road surface is on a big embankment, which is actually 10 feet tall. So this road is actually 10 feet up off the ground level. So here's the ground level. So it comes into the village here, and then this village is sort of like a village of two layers. Let me just get rid of this drawing. There we go. And let's zoom in a bit. So there we go. So where's my pen? There we go. So yeah, this big road here, it's 10 feet above the ground. So the village actually has, if you just see here, so this area here, this is a walkway. These are all between the houses here. These are all walkways. So there's actually a walkway level 10 feet above the ground, and then underneath these areas are actually alleyways. So it's actually a village of 2 levels. So all these buildings have like a ground. They have a ground floor made of brick, like so, and then they have on top, so they have like a wooden frame, and then this is all white plaster, and then they have like a tiled roof on top, and that would be like that. So and that's all. Like, this is what you would sort of expect for medieval houses. So they have sort of like, there's your ground floor, there's the workshop level, and then they probably have like a up in the attic, their living quarters as well. Or they could have another level on top. But at this level here, there's a walkway. So you have, a place down here that people walk on, and down here, up there, Another area. So it's sort of like a city of a village of 2 levels. But this is the village of Carlsberg that people will get to explore. There's the graveyard out the side here where there's a little quest to go and visit the ghosts of the graveyard. But this is not what I wanted to show you today. What I wanted to work on today, if I just hide it, I'll keep the background, put in a new layer to draw all over. Let's put it up the top here. Oh, and if you're wondering, the program that I'm actually drawing in is a program called Clip Studio Paint. There should be a link in the description for this episode. So, you know, if you're looking for a drawing program, I recommend this drawing program. It's really good. It's actually made by, I believe it's a Japanese company, and it was made for drawing manga or comics. So it's really, really good. Whoops. It's got a lot of really good drawing tools. As you can see, drawing squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. I use it for drawing, and I use it for roughing out ideas. But I mostly use it for drawing. Sadly, I don't get to do a lot of drawing these days. But anyway, what I wanted to do today is I wanted to look at... I want to do a couple of different things. So there is a dungeon I'm planning on working on called the Needle, and it's a leftover from the wizards or the magical community that created the world of the cube. And it's basically how could I draw this? So if you imagine the world of the cube, so there's no, that doesn't look right. Let's just get my eraser up bigger. Okay, so it's basically a square pillar like this, and then it... Oops, somebody's sending me messages. So it's a great big square pillar. And it comes down to a point. So imagine an upside down obelisk. That would be this thing. And at the top, there's a viewing room. So there's a big slot window like this. I'm not sure whether I'll have it sort of go around like that. But anyway. But then down the bottom here is sort of like a Stonehenge. I'm not certain whether I'm going to have it circular or I'm going to have it square, that it looks like this would slot into it. I'm sort of still thinking about that. But basically it's at the edge of part of the world of the cube. So it looks like it's a pin that could possibly be stuck into it. But it's actually levitating again above this structure down here, which sort of looks like a big Stonehenge. So I'm still sort of... So basically I wanted to like rough sketch out this idea for this dungeon. Because the whole idea of this dungeon is that it's a leftover from the creators of the world of the cube. And there's actually this sort of electricity type coming off. So it looks like this structure down the bottom, which is sort of creating some sort of magical field that is holding up this pillar or this spire. So I want to give the idea that if this sort of was turned off, this pillar could possibly fall over, and that might actually become, part of an adventure. Maybe the magic that is keeping this going turns off one day, and the whole pillar just sort of falls over, and it ends up all broken and whatnot down on the ground here. But it's like about it's about 10 miles or 10 or 20 miles in height. So, you know, you don't really want it to fall over. It's going to cause a lot of damage if it topples over. So it's kind of, you want to keep it intact. Because there's also a problem. Now, I'm sort of thinking about how to do it. How to do the inside of this. So, and the reason why I'm rough sketching the whole thing is I want to make it all in 3D. It's all in 3D. All my adventure maps that I'm doing from now on are all going to be 3D renders. Oh, pardon me. But now, so that's basically what I'm aiming for. And in the world of the cube, it's sort of like, now imagine I'm looking top down. It's in a position where, so imagine that this is the labyrinth of the world of the cube. I believe I've actually got another sketch where I sketch this out. Now, the Traders Way Road comes along here, and it gets to a platform here, and then it turns and goes back off this way, because there's a roadway going off there, and it gets to a large city, which is a gnome. This is the Principality of East. So that's the city, right? Now this area here is 20 miles, right? So it's basically, if you imagine the world of the cube, so that's looking top down. If we were looking from the side, you're seeing a side profile of the cube. So this is the bottom. This is the top of each of the. I'll have to put up a 3D render because it makes more sense if you'd see the 3D render. But anyway, so this is 20 miles. This width. I'll actually zoom in a little bit. Where's my zoom? Here we go. So this is 20 miles. This height, 20 miles. The width of each of the, because the world of the cube is actually just a giant puzzle. It's a giant maze. So, you know, this block here is 20 miles. There'd be another, you know, sort of plateau here, because because the whole thing is just a giant maze. So at this junction in the maze, there's one of the gnome cities. I think that sort of comes up there. Now, the interesting thing about the gnome cities, and this is where there is, that's actually not that big. There's actually, so the road, the Traders Way Road comes into a little platform about here. That's one of those camping platforms. So there's another road coming off it, and that goes to a giant set of gates in the base of the wall right here. And then there's a city. This is called the Outer City. I've actually got a map that I've drawn of the Outer City. I'll have to put that up sometime. But the Outer City is where all of the non-gnomes, non-imperial gnomes live. That's where all of, you know, your humans, your you know, all your sentient species that everybody can actually live with and get on with, all live in this city. Now, the Principality, and there's 4 of these cities. So if you imagine the world of the cube, if I just quickly draw this, the world of the cube, and there's you know, this is all like mad maze on every side of this. It'll make sense if you look at the website. Each of these cities are actually, if I just switch to a different color, so there's one here, there's one here, one here, one here, and they're all connected by the Traders Way Road, which actually runs between them all, and that's on the top surface of the cube. You know, the maze of the cube does actually go down the sides, and you can actually go down the sides of the cube, but you know, you could fall off, and if you fall off, whoop, gone. Yeah, if you fall off, you fall into the abyss, and you are gone forever. No one knows what happens if you actually fall off. They don't recommend it. But anyway, yeah, so each of these gnome cities, and there is the City of North, City of East, City of South, City of West. Don't confuse that with actual magnetic north, magnetic east, south, and west, because compasses don't actually point. In the world of the cube, compasses don't point north. They point to the center of the cube, and not the center of this plane, or the center of this plane, or the center of this plane. They actually point at the actual center of the cube. So if you were wandering around, so if this is the top surface of the cube, here's the great city of North, here's the lost city of West, because they've lost contact with it, the city of South, and the city of East. And there's the Trader's Way between all of them. If you had a compass, and you were trying to, you know, you're just thinking, oh, I'm lost. If I just follow the compass and go north, I'm just going to be continually walking in a straight line. You will actually walk in a circle, because it'll always be pointing to the center. It'll always be pointing that way. Which is, if you don't know anything about the world of the cube, it can be really confusing. And it's meant to be, because this entire world is a giant puzzle box. But anyway, let's get rid of that. I'm getting off my story. So anyway, so this is the Principality of East, and a little bit of a history about the Principality of East. Each of these gnome cities are actually built into the giant stone walls of the cube itself. So if you imagine, I'll just do a quick sketch. So there's basically, you know, the cube has giant walls like this. If I get rid of and the so if this area is actually this bit here, there's a set of gates down here, and then inside here, inside the wall itself, is actually where there's all these tunnels and whatnot, and then up through this wall, up through this 20 miles of wall, there's balconies, and there's viewing galleries, and little, you know, like little towers sticking out the side. That's the Gnome City is actually inside this stone wall. So you get the Imperial Gnome City inside the stone wall. The outer city is where all of your humans and your non-gnomes live. So that's where your humans, your elves, your halflings, gnomes who are from somewhere other than the cube live. It's basically called the outer city. The Imperial gnomes generally don't give a damn about the outer city. It could be in flames and they wouldn't care. As long as the flames don't get into the gnome city, they're fine. That's why they've got a big set of gates. And the gates are actually quite important, because they're actually a quest piece. Because each of the gnome kingdoms has a key to the gates. Big, ornate, crystalline, you know, beautiful looking key that open the gates. Because according to their lore, the god Mechanos, according to their lore, the god Mechanos created the world of the cube. So he made this world, and then he gifted it to the gnomes. And according to their lore, their religious texts, he brought the gnomes, who were persecuted everywhere throughout the multiverse, he brought them all to the world of the cube, where they could be safe. And he created this puzzle world for them, because Mechanos is the god of innovation and puzzles. He is the god of devices and machines. So obviously the gnomes, who believe that he is, their god and looks after them and all that sort of jazz, they are very big on innovation, machines, creating devices, arcane, all that sort of jazz. So they make all sorts of doodads and doohickeys, and they believe that the world of the cube was created just for them, to keep them safe. So anybody else who ends up on the world of the cube is a trespasser, because Mechanos didn't make the world of the cube for you. He made it for us, the Imperial Gnomes. So you're not as important to this world as we are. Anyway, the Principality of East is a little bit different than most of your big normal gnome cities, because most of the more normal Imperial Gnome cities, they're how to be polite about it, they're a bunch of bigots. They really don't like non-gnomes. They're pretty much, they're really racist. Let's just put it that way. So the Principality of East, which is the city that I'm concerned of. Oh, and this dungeon, the Needle, is actually right here. And it gets to be important, and why it looks like it's facing this city. But anyway, back to the explanation of this city. Because they built into this big stone wall, the old royal family built lots and lots of galleries and balconies and whatnot, and tunnels and things connecting to the wall. So they actually created a situation where the wall, the structure of it, started to break, and eventually one day there was a big calamity, and a crack formed like this, and this entire section cracked out and fell into the valley below. Because you've got to remember, where's my drawing? Yep. So you've got to remember, the gates are down here. The gates into the city are down here, and then they've built, galleries and whatnot all up and down here. So there's all galleries and balconies and tunnels and whatnot. So this entire structure is actually quite, over time, became quite brittle, and then a crack formed like that, and then the whole corner of it, whoop, fell off, and they called it the catastrophe, I can't pronounce it now, whatever. They actually called it the Great Tumble, which is a lot easier to pronounce than catastrophe. Yeah, you know what I mean. So it all broke off and fell into here. But you've got to remember, this is 20 miles high. That's a lot of stone. That's a lot of brick and whatnot. Well, it's not brick. It's actually all carved stone. And so a big chunk of it fell off, sort of like this, into the city below. And so it killed many gnomes who lived in this area. So this entire area here fell off and sort of became like a big pile of junk there. Now, when this calamity, that's a better word, calamity. When this calamity happened, the Great Tumble as they call it, everybody who was underneath where all this rubble fell, obviously, was buried by the rubble, and millions of tons of stone. Everybody, all the gnomes who were living in the gnome city up through here, they obviously went with everything that went down here. So it was bad. It was bad. There were people buried under the rock. There were, homes were destroyed. The whole works. But when this happened, and the two important things that happened. One, the ruling royal family was killed. All of them were actually up in here, and they ended up somewhere under here. So they all got crushed to death. That's rather sad. But because this was a great big calamity, all the people in the outer city helped save people who were being crushed by the stone. They helped save the Imperial Gnomes. And they did it because, you help people in need. And this showed the Gnomes that these people, the others, weren't that bad. They were helping people who had treated them like crap. The Imperial Gnomes, they were helping them. So it sort of showed them, these non-gnomes, they're good people. They can be trusted. And they had a new, because the entire royal family got killed off, a prince rose to the challenge. He was sort of like not really a member of the royal family. He was sort of like, he was the cousin of the cousin whose other cousin was the king. He was that sort of connection. Like, he was royalty, but he was royalty at a distance. He only became sort of the only remaining royalty because the rest of the family got squished. So he sort of stepped forward and he, took charge of the city. And he was a very progressive Imperial Gnome. So he believed that all the other non-gnomes, they were good people. We should accept them into our homes. Build a new future. The whole, utopian sort of thing, which was quite alien to a lot of the Imperial Gnomes, because they'd been brought up thinking, the world of the cube is just for us. These people are trespassers. The whole works. And then you had the prince come along and say, no, look, they helped us in our time of need. They dug your grandma out from under the rubble when she was being crushed by having her house fall on her. The whole works, And so the city of East became sort of cosmopolitan. People from the outer city started to move into, as they rebuilt, this section, what was left of the actual Gnome City. And the Gnome City became multicultural. You actually had Imperial Gnomes moving to the outer city, because a lot of them were scared that the rest of this thing's going to crack and fall off. So the city of East is actually quite different compared to the great city of North and the great city of South. North, just to give you a bit of an overview, so you've got the world of the cube is basically a map like this. North is obviously up the top. The Principality of East is over here. The city of never eat soggy. So South is down here, and West is actually considered to be lost. They've lost contact with West. The great city of North they call it the great city of North. It is a great city. It has the most technological advancements. It looks like, imagine medieval crystal ball cyberpunk. That would be a good way of saying what the great city of North is like. They have, it's not electric street lighting, but it's close enough. They have, magical vehicles, the whole works. The Principality of East sort of went a different direction. Because of the Great Tumble, a lot of the gnomish thinkers who were, up in the city got killed. And they lost a lot of the know-how to make the technology that the city of North has. And because they became very accepting of other cultures and other peoples, the city of North stopped sharing technology with them, because they sort of became to the Imperial Gnomes, they sort of looked at them as they're not following the right doctrine that the rest of us are, because they're integrating too much. So we're not going to share them with our technology. They've lost their technology because you know, a lot of their artificers were killed. But to make up for that, the Imperial Gnomes of East sort of amalgamated magic and steam technology. So this city is very steampunk. This city is very crystal ball steampunk. Now we get to the problem child of the family, South. South is very conservative. They do innovate. The Imperial Gnomes of South do innovate. They do, you know, they do have technology, but it's very conservative. They sort of hoard it, but don't use it. Would be a good way of saying it. They're very compared to the other cities. They're very racist. You know, if you're a non-gnome, you can only exist in the outer city. You can't get into the Imperial City, and you know, you just don't matter to the Imperial Gnomes of East. Yeah, they're not friends. They're actually a foil for this entire role-playing world, as most of the Imperial Gnomes are. But pardon me, compared to the rest, the Imperial Gnomes in East they still have a bit of bigotry on the inside, you know, deep down. But generally, they've sort of seen, you know, other people's. They can be quite nice. They can, you know, be people you want to be around. To the Imperial Gnomes of South, they're very bigoted. They don't want to have anything to do with you. North, they're bigoted, but they see your value. But there's still clear lines. Everybody's equal, but separate, to use that saying. So yeah, that's the Gnome City. So understanding that, that's the Gnome Cities. You've got to have that sort of sitting in your back of your mind the whole time when you're dealing with the Imperial Gnomes. But getting back to this dungeon. Now, this dungeon, which is this great big needle, and you've got to remember this needle is, it'd probably be about 15 miles high, and it's here. So if it actually fell over, and you've got to remember this is 20 miles, it would kind of, the tip of it would go whack right there. It would make a mess, because there's the Imperial City here, but then there's sort of like a big area here. That's sort of, it's not really a city. It's not a village. It's sort of like a loading area. It'd be like our modern version of the docks at a modern city, because the Trader's Way is where all the trade happens. So that all the trade comes along, they'd unload it here and then take it into the city there. So yeah, if this thing toppled over, splat, it's going to take out this trading hub. So you don't want it to fall over. Falling over, bad. But it's good to know that's... You need to know, with this dungeon, you need to know what's around it, because it sort of determines why it's there. And there's a bit of history that I'm working on as to why it's here, why... because back... Let's go to another piece of canvas. Here we go. So here's our timeline. Present day. The world of the cube was created here. And it was created by wizards, gods, you know, creatures of great power. blah blah blah. So they made it here in our timeline, and it took a while for them to create it because they needed to set up communities. So if I come back over here, now this is before these gnome cities existed. So north, south, east, and west didn't exist now. You had the world of the cube came into being, and it was a big puzzle world, like a big labyrinth all over it. The magical community that created it then created the Trader's Way. They made this giant roadway on the top of the cube to act as a easily traversable roadway that they could move their building goods throughout the world, because they needed to build their settlements. They used vast amounts of magic to build their settlements, but they still needed to move stuff around. So anyway, so they created the Trader's Way, and then they established lots of different communities about here. So up to this point, they're basically doing construction. And then they create, there'd be community here, all around, this. So this area here would be where the those who did enchantment were. Then the next area here be the guys who did they mastered fireball, whatever. Then the next area, this is actually pretty poignant. This would be the area where you had the people who did magical animals. And then the next area would be the people who did elixirs, because there's a bit of history about a guy who did elixirs here and enchantment for magical animals. That was the previous two adventures. So anyway, yeah, there's all these different communities, right? So the world of the cube is broken up into these areas. There's all these different communities, and then you had an area in the middle, which is basically like the council, the leading council of this community that made the cube. But so that was that initial period, and this was their first golden age. They had a golden age of the cube, and they made great advances in magical knowledge and whatnot. But like all civilizations, they had a fight, which was this period here. This was the first. I'm not really certain how to call it, but basically they had a war. They had a civil war, and this was the first civil war. I'm actually going to leave the lore about what happened here and what they call it, and what happened here and what they call it, very, very vague. So this is the first golden period. But this is the first age of enlightenment, is what they call it. Then they have a civil war, and it's basically over. It's basically a power struggle. Who runs the place? It gets resolved. There's a new body that now run the place, and they have the second golden era. And once again, they get up to another. They get up to the next bit, but this is far more totalitarian. The second golden age. They make more advances than the first golden age, but in the second golden age, it's a bit more totalitarian. And eventually, again, they get to a point where it's a battle over who runs the place. They have another great big war, which happens here. Well, actually, it's actually bigger than the previous one, so I'll make it, like this. So, Civil War. Oops. Civil War. And then here again. Civil War. But this war, if I just go back to having some black. There we we go. But this one is actually worse. Because during this time, they started to create slave races. They started to create slave species. And they started to create disposable creatures, like just entire races of disposable creatures, just so they can have things to experiment on. And you get to see this in the second adventure, or it's actually going to be the third adventure, which is going to be the that I'm working on. I forget the name, but it's the Font of Understanding. In the Font of Understanding, you discover a lab that was made sometime during the Second Golden Age. So this is the First Golden Age. Let's call it Era. And then this is the second. And I'm going to shoot that bird. Shut up. Shut up. So Second Golden Era. But yeah, this civil war here is a lot worse. And I might even say, technically, it never ended. Technically, it never ended. For these guys, it ended. But technically, it didn't end. So this second era, in the Font of Understanding, you will discover a lab where a wizard was actually conducting research on people. And what he was effectively doing is he was teaching them language skills. And he was teaching them basic knowledge. And then he would cut their head off, put it in a special device, scan their brain to work out how had their brain stored that information. Because what he was trying to do is he was trying to distill an elixir that would, by drinking the elixir, it would instill language skills and a base set of knowledge into a subject. So, and the entire idea was to not make an elixir that people would drink, because, you know, we already know language skills and whatnot. It was an elixir that you could give to animals. So if you've got a familiar, you know, you've got a hawk familiar, or you're a wizard and you've got a ferret familiar or whatever like that, you could feed it this elixir, and then suddenly, whoop, it understands what you're speaking. And it can depending upon its vocal cords and whatnot, it could probably speak back to you. So if your familiar was a bird, it would be able to, because a lot of birds can actually work out how to speak basic words, it would be able to converse with you because it can make words. Other creatures themselves would be able to make words. So you actually find a lab left over from the Second Golden Era, where it's a wizard conducting immoral and unethical experiments upon people by chopping their heads off. So you actually find that lab. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm putting into the adventure that sort of leans into stuff that's left behind that was created by this magical community in the First and Second Golden Era. But here's the thing with the Second Golden Era. So the Second Golden Era was a big advancement. They made huge advancements in learning and whatnot. Because part of the whole idea why this community created the world of the cube is that it's effectively a world where they can do their research without anybody looking over their shoulder. There's no board of ethics. There's no group that says, oh, that's immoral, you shouldn't do that. It's no holds barred scientific exploration for scientific exploration. Except it's all magic and whatnot. So it's no holds barred. It's, you know, if you can do it, you get away with it. If it's unraveling the secrets of the multiverse. Hey, who cares if you have to kill a few million people? So yeah, it's not a very nice place. Especially if you can't defend yourself. You're a test subject if you can't defend yourself. Which is where we get to this second civil war and the fall of the second golden era, and the fall entirely of the wizards, gods, and powerful creatures. Their society basically collapses here. It basically goes into a downward spiral. And this is where the world of the cube ends up with dungeons everywhere, because all of these magical communities were all fighting against each other. So in order to get away from, and they were each creating devices and magical spells and whatnot to kill each other. And a lot of these things are still, left lying around. But in order to get away from each other, they all started to basically burrow. So imagine, this is the walls of the cube. They started to burrow into the walls of the cube and then fill their dungeons with traps, so that anyone or anything trying to get in at them gets killed, and they can then live. They've got their little dungeon in here. They've made themselves nice and comfortable, and they can hopefully live in there. But when you've got dastardly people who don't think that ethics and morals are elastic, they tend to come up with horrible ways of killing each other. So a lot of these dungeons that these wizards and whatnot made to live in are still there. The wizards are actually dead inside because somebody else, this guy made a dungeon there to live in, but these guys here made machines that came over and wiped them out. That stuff was happening wholesale throughout this period. And it's sort of, I'll draw it as like a line with an arrow, because it kind of didn't stop. There is no time where, because usually, like with the first golden era and the second golden era, this was a civil war over who ran the place. So at this point here, there was a revolt against whoever was running the place, and then at this point here, they came along and went, whoever won the civil war went, hey, now I'm in charge, and then they continued on. At this point here, the civil war kicked off. They started annihilating each other, but then it got that bad in, say, here and here, that certain forces basically annihilated these guys. And then you end up with a lot of their machines and what in the world of the cube still there, still functioning, all on, because some of the devices would just roll into an area and just go, okay, all living material's dead. So all the devices are still there, they're still on, they're still doing the thing, just everybody's dead. So that sort of happens here. So there is no, you get to all the rest of this, there is no point where another ruling council pops up and says, okay, we're in charge now. Because there wasn't anyone left to do that. They'd killed each other. This is sort of where, and now this is, if you don't want to know, if you don't want to metagame, and you don't want to know, because this is a big spoiler, if you don't want to know a lot of the background history of what happens in here, and you want it all to be a surprise, tune out now. Because I'm about to give away some of the reason why some things are the way they are. And the big reason is the Imperial Gnomes. The Imperial Gnomes are one of the creatures or species created during the Second Golden Era to be a disposable life form, a disposable species. They used them as, they could just manufacture them, the Imperial Gnomes. So basically they took because there were gnomes, there were gnomes in this group. there were gnomes in this group. There were halflings in this group. There were elves. There were humans. There were orcs. You know, the whole works. Shamans. The whole works. Witches. And they made manufactured goblins, and they manufactured orcs, and they manufactured imps and whatever, all these different creatures. And one of them just happened to be, they used the template of gnomes, and they made disposable gnomes effectively, and they used them as servants. They used them as test subjects. The whole gambit. There were even, when the war broke out, there were some wizards who just manufactured armies of gnomes, and they used them to, you know, you'd have, oh, I'm trying not to burp here, pardon me, you know, you'd have these guys here, they might raise an army of 1,000 gnomes to go and wipe out these guys right beside them. So you'd have, you know, suddenly you'd have like an entire army of gnomes just traipsing in there and killing everything in sight. And then these guys would then, after, you know, once that's happened, they'd go, oh, don't need them anymore, and then they'd just exterminate all their gnome army, because they're disposable. Why keep the army around once you're done with it? And then these guys here, they do the same thing to them and wipe them out. Tit for tat. You know, the world of the cube and the Civil War, it was just nuts. And you know, and a lot of these things, if they weren't cleaned up, they're still roaming around. There could be 100-year-old gnomes who were created as part of an army, still traipsing around, thinking that, oh, they've got to kill all the wizards in this area. So if you're a wizard and they find you, they'll off you. They don't know why. That's just what their programming was. But anyway, this is part of why they never reach a point where another ruling council takes over, because they exterminated each other completely. But also, particularly for the Imperial Gnomes, revolted against their creators, and they deliberately, during the Civil War, they were used as a combat force, and they continued to work for these factions. So, you know, if this faction was trying to wipe out this faction, the Imperial Gnomes would go along with it. But then, once they've wiped out this faction, they'd turn around and they'd wipe these guys out, because that's how they got their freedom. Is they killed those who created them. Then after they had annihilated them, they basically came up with, they needed to create their own civilization, and they sort of came up with their own founding myth, that the great god Mechanos, who actually was a great god, Mechanos did actually exist. He was one of these guys. He helped create the world. So I'm going to leave it open-ended as to whether Mechanos actually did help them. He did, you know, maybe he did actually help them gain their freedom by fighting all the wizards, other wizards and other gods, as a means to an end. You know, he wanted to get away, or he wanted to rule the place himself, but eventually the gnomes, they killed him too. So Mechanos got offed. And the gnomes sort of came up with their founding myth that Mechanos had created the world for them, and the world only existed for them, because they went on a rampage. They killed everything that wasn't a gnome. They wiped out the works. They killed everything. And then they founded each of the 4 big cities. They founded the 4 big cities, because there's actually, this is where the keys come in handy, or actually knowing about the keys. There are machines to actually run, the world of the cube is actually a giant machine, because you gotta remember it's huge. Inside the world of the cube, there's big machines that keep effectively the enchantment that keeps it together. There's machines that actually are working 24/7 running the world of the cube, that they're going inside there. And the keys, each of the keys provide access to locks that unlock access into the insides of the cube. So the gnomes took over those keys, and they gave each, there were 4 big main families that they founded. The Iron Sparks are the big family. They are the top royal family. They have the key to North. It's sort of like, not necessarily the parent key or the master key, but you know, you've got to have this key to make it work. If you don't, if you don't have the others, possibly North could get away with, or get some access, but not full access. If you have all 4 keys and you unlock all 4 locks in each of the cities, then you get access to the world, the inner workings of the cube itself. So that's why those keys became important. And in their mythology that they created, their mythology was that Mechanos gave those keys to the 4 great houses of the gnomes, and the Imperial gnomes. They actually, they didn't have families before that. They created these families afterwards. So this is where their whole myth sort of comes from. They established these families after the fact, because they were a manufactured people. They had no families. They had no family ties. So they created this whole myth later on to basically bind them all together, and it's the whole idea. You know, if you want to run a society, have a religion that keeps everybody in control. So a lot of the Imperial gnomes now, because it's now, let's get back up to our timeline. It's now, say, somewhere about here. So we're about here on the timeline. The war sort of ended about here, or it reached a point where there was really no one else left to kill. And this is where the gnomes sort of founded their mythology. And over the years, all of the gnomes who were around, when this war happened, died off. So now all the Imperial gnomes that are left don't really know all this history. They don't know any of this history at all. There's rumors, there's some divining of what the history is, but it's all bits. They don't really know the full story. They don't really know that their own story is that, they exterminated the creators of their world, and they exterminated their own creators. So that is a huge sneak peek behind the scenes of the world of the cube that I'm working on, lore-wise. So that's sort of why the gnomes, the Imperial gnomes, you've got to remember, these are the gnomes who were born on the world of the cube. The Imperial gnomes, that's why they're so bigoted, because everybody prior, all the wizards and whatnot, basically used them as a disposable research subjects creature. So that's why they pretty much really don't like anyone else. And now, because it's like, generation after generation after generation after generation after generation after generation to this generation, that's why the story is so convoluted, and why it's now it's not that they hate wizards, it's just become general bigotry all over. They won't go out of the way to kill non-gnomes, but they just don't want you around. They don't think this world was created for you, it was created for them. So, how does this come back to the needle? The needle was created by a wizard, by one of these magic users, and he built inside this device, because you've got to remember the whole thing floats. He built a cloning facility, effectively, and he moved it to this position, facing one of the gates, because you've got to remember the keys are required to get access to the inner workings of the cube. He has inside here a facility that makes creatures. So he was making his own army. His idea was he's going to station his base here, make an army, attack because this would be fairly late in the conflict. So this is sort of like in the timeline. This would probably be maybe here. It would take place here. So the gnomes, the Imperial gnomes, have wiped out huge amounts of the population, but there's still bits of the population around that are, you know, fighting back. So this guy is creating an army that he plans to attack this city, and this is long before the tumble. So the city, and this long before the outer city existed. So none of this exists. So this is way back in history. So the Traders' Way Road still, you know, the Traders' Way Road actually existed at this point in time. There was this road coming to here, and there were gates because that's where you gain entrance to where the lock is. So the lock is in here, and that will be an adventure of itself later on. So his entire idea was that he's going to put his little magical fortress here. It's levitating, so no one can get access to him. And he's going to form an army and then attack in there to the gnomes who are holding the keys. But it doesn't go his way. For some reason, the attack never happens. The wizard dies for some reason, and his fortress is left there. Now, my reasoning is that this structure down the bottom is actually in place. The ancient Imperial gnomes built it to keep the needle from moving away. Because the whole needle, if this wasn't here, and someone figured out how to control this, you know, they just go, yeah, okay, let's leave. The whole thing would just levitate and just whoop, wander away. So this structure down here is actually there to keep this structure, this floating structure, in place. So that's the idea of this. This structure here is it's a locking. It's sort of like a big magical lock. And I sort of have this idea that it looks like Stonehenge, or something similar to Stonehenge, but you know, big monolithic stone blocks, the whole works. So that's keeping that in place. Then there's the wall of the cube. So it's actually on a corner, because if you look at where's my map? You look at this. This is actually a corner of the world of the cube. One of the big mountain-sized walls is actually here, and it's just sort of levitating off to the side of it. So there's the wall here, and up. I'll actually draw this in profile. So imagine there's the needle, and it comes down to a point. Then you've got the things down the bottom holding in place, and then you've got your electricity sort of flowing around. Then you've got the wall of the cube comes to here. Now, the gnomes have built, later on, they built a structure inside the wall of the cube that allows you to get up to, because there's an entrance. The only entrance is way up here, and they built a bridge, right? So there's some sort of pulley system that pulls a carriage up a passageway to here, so you can get across, right? And they've built this later on because, and so here's the viewing windows. There's viewing windows here, right? Because and there's multiple levels to this inside this structure because it's all hollow. So there's a big cloning, basically a cloning facility inside here, and it's on. It's pumping out little warriors, and I'm thinking that they're going to be like little imps. So it's making small, so they're actually smaller than a gnome. They're making small little imps. Now, the devices, so there's going to be a device room down the bottom that effectively keeps the spire levitating. So there'll be a control room, so levitation. Control room. Be down here. But there'll be probably up in this room up here, flight controls. Or some way to control where the needle goes. So flight controls. So it'd be like I've sort of imagined like a crystal ball. You know, a wizard's got his hands over a crystal ball and he can sort of manipulate the crystal ball to determine, okay, I'm going to move the spire this way, and it'll slowly start levitating off in that direction. And that's why there's these big observation windows. Is you need to see where you're going. But then there's all these levels. So the first few levels would probably be like living quarters. Then you get down, so this would be, I'd say, living quarters. Then you would have labs, and you would have cloning. Because the whole idea of this adventure and how the setup of this is today, so it was probably moved into position, say, I think it was about here, is when the wizard was going to moved into position and do his attack. But then he sort of, something happened to him. Something got him. So it was moved into position, everything was turned on, he started to make his army, he vanished, died, had a heart attack, whatever. Some other wizard got an assassin that wiped him out. Who knows? Maybe the Imperial Gnomes were able to get an assassin in to kill him before he attacked them. Who knows? For some reason, he dies. This thing's left in place, and what's happening now is that it's all full of these little imps. It's full of these little imp creatures, and the Imperial Gnomes have established up the top here, so they've captured the top of it, so the top few floors, and they hold the top few floors of this building to keep the imps from getting out. Because if the imps get out, they're going to, it'll be bad for the countryside, and the imps will probably try and attack them because, they're still genetically programmed to attack and try and get the key from this place. So the Imperial Gnomes have this place and they hold it, but they can't go down into the dungeon, effectively all the labs and whatnot, because the deeper down you go, the more of the little imps there are, and they will quite simply overrun you and kill you. So what the Imperial Gnomes do is they've fortified this top section, and the imps don't have food down in here. They've effectively all turned to cannibalism to simply survive. They eat each other. But every now and then, because the machines are still making more and more imps, every now and then they try to escape. A whole heap of them will come rushing up out of the spire and try and break out. And this garrison are just simply there to prevent them from getting out. Now, there's two little adventures. One's a side quest, one's an actual quest that I want to do. the side quest is that adventurers can go, they can actually get a contract with the city where they go to this garrison, and their job, their contract, is to see if they can get down deep enough in this dungeon to turn the machines off that are pumping out these little imps. The machines are still running, and they're whacking out, you know, maybe 5 or 6 imps a day, which is why, you know, it takes a couple of days for the tower to become full of imps that a portion of them think that they have a chance to fight their way out. Which is why the garrison really only has to worry about a mob of imps trying to get out every other week. Because the imps know that they need to keep numbers inside the tower to prevent the gnomes from getting in. But there's so many gnomes being made that so many imps being made that every now and then they need to just let a group of them try and get out. So the Imperial Gnomes have this garrison. They let adventurers come in, and they let adventurers try and get down into the structure to A, kill off as many imps as they can, and B, see if they can find the machines to turn off the cloning system. Pardon me. So that's the side quest. The side quest is adventurers can simply go there, and it's like computer games where when you first start out level 1, you go and do the XP grind of going down into the sewers and killing all the rats. So it's effectively that. The actual quest is the garrison will get overrun. They will get exterminated by these little guys, and these little guys will come pouring out and pouring down here and out of this tower, and they'll be doing 2 things. They'll be trying to destroy the locking device that's keeping the tower in place, because they want to move it. They want to move the tower. Because once they've recaptured this, they've captured flight control, so they can move the tower. They want to leave. The second thing they want to do is they actually want to attack. They want to do what they were made to do. They want to do their actual attack and try and capture the key that's in this facility, that's in the city. But, this is now years and years after this entire thing was actually set in motion. So now this city, it looks, here's the shrine of Mechanos, the key, the lock in it, and then here's the city outside, and there's a city area here. So here's the city outside. So if these guys get out, it's going to be hell to pay, because there'll be people, they'll get out and they'll start killing people in the town and whatnot, and it's going to be a big calamity. So that will be the actual quest, is the city will be sort of going to adventurers and the city guard and whatnot, because the city guard will actually try and defend the actual city. So they'll be busy working on their defenses. So the first thing they'll do is they'll work on their defenses, and then they will get adventurers, and they'll say, hey, look, we will pay you a king's ransom if you go and recapture the control room and help us put a garrison back in place to take control of this thing. That's the actual quest. So yeah, that's the Needle, and that's a ton of lore about the world of the cube, just about this one spot in this one city. So I hope you've had a lot of fun listening to. I'm starting to think about wrapping up, because I'm starting to get hungry. I'm getting hungry. But yeah, that is a lot of the background knowledge that is going to be sort of tucked away in the background of each adventure. So in the previous adventures, I haven't really alluded to it, but in the next adventure, which is the Font of Understanding, you find the lab that was probably created about here. You find the Font of Understanding lab, and it starts to show that this lab, they were doing some really unethical things in this lab. So it starts to show that maybe these guys getting wiped out was not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is now is that the world of the cube exists. It's still running. It's still teleporting people from the multiverse onto itself, because there's a big teleportation matrix that just grabs people from the multiverse and plonks them onto it, which is why the Great Quest exists. The Great Quest is to find the machine that allow people to teleport home. That's the Great Quest. So I hope I've been fun and interesting to listen to. Please, if you enjoy these lore live streams and drawing live streams, please like, subscribe, all that sort of jazz. I actually feel dirty saying that, but yeah, please like and subscribe, and tune in next Monday, where I will sit here and blabber all about something else again. Thank you for watching. I hope you had a lot of fun. Oop, I've lost my mouse pointer. Till next time.